Take two. Hi, my name is Tom Haslett. I am with the Nebraska Veterans Memorial Foundation Share Your Story project. Bellevue University is a sponsor of the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial Park project. I am here at the Bellevue University Military Veterans Center with Navy veteran Terry Hester, who has agreed to share his story for the Library of Congress Veterans History Project and the Nebraska Veterans Memorial Park Project. Terry, let's begin with your full name and where you were born.
Okay, my full name is Robert Terry Hester. I was born June 14th, 1947 in Omaha, Nebraska.
What were you interested in school, and why did you go into the Navy?
Well, after graduation and during my high school, which I participated in all the sports, my dad is a World War II veteran, Purple Heart, and we always had conversations as far as the military, and Dad really pushed the respect for the country, the flag, and when I was growing up, it was always yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no man, or if you didn't do that, you'd get your butt kicked, So that's how my dad raised my brother and I, and that was the start of it. And a quick note about my father. He never talked about World War II at all. But one evening on a Sunday, we had drinking a couple beers, and after supper, we sit down in the front room, and he said the sea is red. And I said, Dad, you're going to have to explain that to me, because he's never ever said anything about World War II to me. And he said, well, when I was over there, we was on the ship, and when we landed on shore, he said the front of the boat come down so we could all go, and he said the bay was red, and he said you had to push all the bodies away to get to the beach to get yourself buried in the sand to keep alive. And that's the only thing that he ever said about World War II, was the sea was red. And that stuck, I guess, in my head for the rest of my life. And then after I graduated, Dad says, I think it's time, for you to do something for your country. And I says, absolutely. And he says, I'd stay out of the Army, but he says, take your pick. So I went and joined the Navy.
Did your brother join?
No, my brother was 4 years older than me, and he graduated, went to Midland College, got married, and had a child, and he was earlier, and I guess I was right in the middle of the hunt type situation.
So in high school, did you join right after you graduated?
Well, I graduated in '65, and there was recruiters there that came to talk to us, and they didn't push John Flute, but they deferred us a little bit and says, the draft is coming up and you're going to be X number, and then when I got the draft notice, I was in the 20s or 30s in the numbers. So I said, if I go join, I have a pick. If I don't join, get drafted, I may not have a pick. So that's why I went and joined the Navy.
How'd your parents feel about that?
They was both good. In the 60s, in a little town of Waterloo, you was either good or bad, or respectful or disrespectful, and I think all of us that decided to go. My classmates and everything, we all went. You know, all the dads was veterans, so we all went. We all joined, similar at the same time, just about. So,
Did you wanted to go into a certain field, or did you leave that open?
I left that open. You know, I was probably not the smartest move I ever made. I worked for a newspaper before I went in, and I was a photographer for the newspaper, covering different events in the community, and the sheriff's office had my phone number. So if there was an accident, I always had a camera in my car and stuff. So I guess I wasn't smart enough, or the recruiter didn't signify. So maybe I could have went to photo school right after boot camp, but that wasn't the case. So yeah.
Did you join under a buddy program?
No, no. Just went down and said it was time, and got down there, and my dad dropped me off and says, "I'll see you when I see you." And I walked in and didn't seem to after boot camp. So,
what was the most surprising thing in boot camp?
well, you know, I don't think there was anything that surprising, because how I was raised, it was the same thing. It was, I had the respect and the dignity and the, the foresight to know that, what was coming. So it was nothing surprising for me that, that I was going to get up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and the marching and the running, and they tell you when to eat and poop and sleep and everything else, but that's that's part of the boot camp. So yeah, nothing surprising or nothing shocking in the boot camp. I think in boot camp the only thing that was shocking was 2 days before I got out of boot camp, everybody went to the formed a line for shots. And they had a list of names that actually they didn't have names, but then it was all your military number. They put that military number in your head, and it's never used once you got out. But I don't think there's a military person on earth that doesn't know their military number. It's ingrained in. So we went to the shots. And the guy looks up my number and he goes, "You go to that line." And I go, "Okay." So I went to that line, and I got 12 the first day. And so I knew that wasn't going to be a good deal. And the guy says, "See you tomorrow." And so I went back the next day and got 5 more. So in 2 days I had 17 shots out of boot camp. So I knew I wasn't going stateside. I got the orders to go to the ship, and had a couple of weeks off of boot camp, and then off we went.
So you didn't receive any training before you hit the ship?
No.
What was your career field as you went to the ship?
The first day I got on the ship, there was 5 of us, and a guy, and the chief says, "You're going to go to the forward deck, you're going to go to aft deck, we're going to teach you how to be a radioman," and, yada, yada, yada. So I was on the aft deck, and when we first got on, I looked, because it was in the afternoon, and I looked, and all of these guys are sitting around on buckets with a hammer chipping on the deck. And that's when the reality hit that goes, this is not going to be fun. And the next day I was the same thing with them. Some of them had their shirts off, wrapped around their head away from the sun, and just chipping on the deck.
Get back to the first time you saw the ship. What did you think about?
First of all, it looked really big, to start with, and I knew it was I knew what kind of ship it was, so I knew what the job was going to be. But the first thing the chief said, he says, he says, you understand we've got ammunition on board, and we all knew that. And he goes, don't worry about it, because he says, you might see the flash, but you'll never hear the explosion.
What was the name of the ship?
USS Haleakala. It was an AE-25. It was the only, one of the newer ammo ships in there, and we had the distinction of being an N on the back of it, which we carried nuclear weapons, which supposedly there wasn't very many. We was the only ammo ship that carried them at that time. And we strictly unloaded ammunition. No shells, just projectiles, bombs, and that stuff. That was the ship's job and duty.
Can you describe one of your first days there on the ship? You mentioned about the detail, but what was your life like in the beginning?
Well, we started out. They was just loading the ship, and being green, we didn't have any ideas. So we set sail out of the Philippines. That's where I joined the ship, and it took us 3 days to get up to Vietnam into the Gulf of Tonkin. And then I learned out real quick the next morning. We got up at 4:30 in the morning, and at the second an E4, he kind of ramrodded us and says, now, here's what you're going to do. Here's how it works. Watch us for a little bit, and then I'm going to have you start helping us. About 5:30, behind us, you could see a carrier starting to come up alongside of us. So then the carrier would come up on the starboard side, and one of the destroyers, which was called Tin Cans, they would come up on the port side, and they would call mooring lines that they would take a string and a ball and take a gun and shoot it over from our ship over to the carrier, and then we would pull mooring lines back. So one of my first jobs was we had 5 of us on the mooring lines. So it was all hand done, wrapped around a couple hooks. So if the ship pulled away from us, we would give a little bit of slack. If the ship come to us, we would pull a little bit more to keep it halfway tight between the two ships. And then they would bring, on the deck we had 1,000 and 2,000 pound bombs, and we would put those, and those would just, they was in nothing. They would just roll around. If the water was bad, they would just roll around on the deck. And that's what beat the deck up so bad. So you would take one of them when we got there, put a cargo net down, then roll it into the cargo net, hook the pin to it, and then transfer it over to the aircraft carrier. And then the up front done the black powder. On the port side, they did the projectiles for the tin cans. And then after the carrier left, the cruiser would come up, and then we would give ammunition to the cruiser. They would be 6 projectiles on a pallet, and the cargo net they'd pick them up out of the hole, swing them up, put them on a cargo net. We would hook them up and then transport them over to and one of my jobs was then we had the helo deck full of Navy fuselages, which was gas tanks for the airplanes, basically. And we would bring them from the helo deck down and put them in the net, and they would transfer anywhere from 4 to 6 of them at a time. And we would have probably a couple hundred of them on the helo deck that we would transport to them. So.
Was there any emergencies during this transfer?
No, we never had anybody hurt, never had anybody pulled overboard. A couple scary incidences where everybody carried knives. That was standard because we all wore life jackets, especially us that was on the lines, because that line is about a 2-inch diameter line, and if that would get hooked in a string or something, you was always franticing to just cut the crap out of that life jacket to get away from it, because it would pull you right over. And I think about the second time I cut the crap out of my life jacket to get away from it. So
it was close.
yeah, it was close. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you definitely wouldn't want to be dropped between two ships, because you would be gone. You know, I mean, propellers on both of them going 24 knots. You know, yeah, just kind of kiss your butt goodbye, I guess, because you're not going to be found hardly at all.
So on each deployment, how many ships could you resupply?
We would hook between, depending on the craziness, at least 2 and sometimes 3 carriers, and the carriers always had a cruiser with them, and then on the other side, each group had about 8 tin cans or 8 destroyers with them. So anywhere from 20 to 24 destroyers, and usually 3 carriers, and sometimes 2 carriers, depending on how much each one of them wanted and stuff on it. So then on the and then I was assigned to the helo deck. The helo deck was when an admiral or somebody came, or they needed to transport an individual, the helo would land on our helo deck, or they would take, we had nets on the sides, and they would roll them nets down so they'd lay flat. So when the helo would land, there was 2, one of us on each side would go up and chalk it so it wouldn't be drifting back. Well, one time the guy come up a little bit and blew me back into the net. You know, that was another one that I could have been overboard, but wasn't. So I come back up and chalked it again. And I guess the only funny thing about that is once we had a full admiral come up, and usually they let the admiral get away and then the helicopter leave. Well, the pilot left a little early, and that admiral's hat went right in the ocean, and that was the admiral was not a happy camper by losing his hat with all them scrambled eggs on the top of it and stuff. So
did the ship have any instances where there was attacked or lost power, or
we was being our ship, early evening sometimes we would have unidentified boats coming in our direction. So in our case, it wouldn't take but 5 to 10 minutes, and we had a couple planes off of one of the carriers buzzing us. You know, we found out we had 2 or 3 coming. These guys was coming off the river boats, you know, coming up and see if we had fruit or vegetables or anything that they could have, because those guys that was hell. You know, I've got a friend of mine in the chapter was the 50 caliber front gunner on one of those things, and he said, you know, sometimes it'd be a couple of weeks before they'd come back, you know, with very little. So he said they would, if they seen a ship out there, if they thought they could come out and try to signal them and get bananas or fruit or les or anything that we had spare, they would take it. So, but we had a couple threats, you know, a couple little gook boats, you know, they called them, and the Vietnamese, you know, they couldn't do anything to us, but still we would have a couple planes buzz us, you know. So
how close were you to shore?
We wasn't in the 3 mile, but we was in the 5 mile. But you could sit at night out on the deck and watch the destroyers line up and bomb the inlet. You know, we go, well, there goes our ammo that we just gave him. He's already spent it for us. So, but yeah, that that was another one of my projects. Do you want me to continue on to my next one?
That's your story.
Okay, so the next project that I got in the middle of, and I don't know how I always got in the middle of these things, but when we come back into the Philippines, we come into Longapo, and I was one of the coxswains on the Liberty boat. We got three. It's a little boat, because being an ammo ship, we parked as the last pier in Subic Bay, away from everybody else. So we did not load the ship ourselves. The Philippines and the crew on the beach, on the land, they loaded the ship for us. So we was there 3 days, so we was in 3-day rotation. So you got 1 day off, and in 2 days you did something else. You worked on the deck, or you did this, and part of the time you got 1 day where you didn't have to do anything, which almost everybody slept. But then the Liberty boats, we'd have to transport the guys from the ship into town. And those Liberty boats, I was the coxswain, and I had an engineer, and I had a bosun mate with me. So we'd take them in there, and then at midnight was the last trip that we had to come back and pick them up. So when we would come back in at midnight, the short patrol would have all of the, I guess the easiest term would be drunks, laying out on the pier. So it was my job and the engineer's job, or my job and the other decade, because the engineer always stayed on the Liberty boat. We would go out and say, this one's mine, because we'd have 3 or 4 ships in. So then the short patrol would just grab them by the arms or something, drag them in and drop them into our Liberty boat. So that was the thing, is make sure you got all of your guys on your ship back in the boat, and it took about 25 minutes to get back to our ship. And the key was to get back there before any of them woke up, because they either wanted to get sick or fight, one or the other. So,
How many people were on the ship?
I can't tell you exactly. I'm guessing probably, there had to be 20, 40. I imagine there was 300, I suppose, on the deck force, and the engineers and stuff, and then plus the officers.
So how long did you spend on the ship, time-wise?
Well, time-wise, I got there in April, May or June of '66. Was over there, and then we came back. We spent Christmas over there, spent New Year's over there. Come back to Port Chicago in California. We spent, I got married the 27th of January. I think the 29th or the 30th of January, we went back. And then I got off, had another birthday on the ship. So then I got off in mid-'67, a great ensign, a great JG on there, one of our officers. The captain didn't particularly like him because his hair was too long, so he came down and ate with all of us enlisted. So we got to know him pretty well. And on my records, it showed that I was a photographer before I got on. So he come and asked me one day, he says, this is your second tour, do you want to get off? I'll put in for photo school for you. So that's what he did. So I got off and went to photo school.
Talking about your bride, I didn't hear anything about your bride in your story. You want to tell her?
Well, I'll back up one place on the ship. When we come back in Hawaii, obviously again we're parked clear out in no man's land. So coxswain was bringing everybody back into the beach. First time I come in, the Water Shore Patrol picked me up. East 7 Navy chief, he stops me with the guys full of Liberty guys, and he said I was speeding. And he said, do you know how fast he was going? And I says, no, chief, I don't. And he says, you was doing 6 knots. And I go, Chief, we don't have speedometers on this thing. I've got a gas gauge and an oil gauge. That's all I got. He goes, well, you can only do 4 knots. And I says, okay. So how did you know I was doing 6 knots instead of 4 knots? And he goes, well, the wake was a little high when you was coming in, so I estimated that you was doing 6 knots instead of 4 knots. So when I got back, I had to go back and tell my lieutenant that, he didn't give me a ticket, but I got reprimanded for doing 6 knots instead of 4 knots in the Bay of Hawaii. So, so that was that part of that. To my wife, when we got married in Vallejo, California, between deployments, and came back and went to photo school in Pensacola, Florida, and she was expecting. So I go in and I'm an E3, so I wasn't getting much respect because everybody else was right out of boot camp going to photo school. So just for shits and giggles, I guess, I go in and see if I could get Navy housing. Well, the lady at the front desk says, you got to be at least E5 to get Navy housing, and she says that I was E3, and lo and behold, a chief back in about the 3rd cubicle turns around the deck. I got my whites on, I got my ribbons on, and he goes, come on back here and talk to me for a minute. He goes, where'd you just come from? And he said, I had my ship's patch on, and he goes, so you're here right out of Vietnam? I go, yes, sir. And he goes, got your wife? I go, yes, she's pregnant. And he goes, give me a week, and I'll get you Navy. I'll get you government housing. Saved our lives. He really did, because we was scrambling trying to find an apartment or something. Didn't have a clue. Took us 2.5 days from Nebraska to drive there. Just blind going in. So thank goodness for him. So through the photo school and everything went well, and then my wife went to the hospital on Thursday evening. Thought she was going to deliver the baby. So Friday morning, I get up and go back to photo school, and I've got an E7 chief that's there. So I filled out a chit for 3 days off. Chief don't know me from anybody, so he denies it. He says, did we issue your wife in that sea bag? And I said, nope, Chief. And he goes, well, he says, I think you can probably stay here Friday, and then maybe we'll get you off for the weekend. So I'm kind of disappointed. I'm 21 years old, peed off, but that leave goes clear up to the top, and the top of the chain of command there was a W4. So the W4 approves it, and it comes back down because the W4 and a lieutenant commander looked at my files and seen where I had been. So he knew I wasn't right out of boot camp. He knew where I had been. So he came down and approved it. So the first class says, get out of here and we'll see you Monday. And he said, if there's a problem, you let me know. I go, that's fine, Chief. So I come back Monday, and where's Chief so-and-so? He's gone. Saturday, the W4 transferred him. Don't know where he went, don't have a clue, but the chief gave me crap on Friday, and Saturday he got transferred. So the W4 did not appreciate what he did, I guess, to a Vietnam vet. So that was the end of that. So then went to Chesapeake Bay, Norfolk, Virginia, it was the Fleet Atlantic Navy Intelligence Center. So in the middle of the Fleet Atlantic Navy Intelligence Center, we did all the processing for all of the U-2s that flew Cuba. So we would get film. They flew twice a week. They flew on Mondays and they flew on Thursdays. And so we knew how many nails everybody in Cuba bought, how many pieces of lumber they bought, what they built. In 3 days, how far what they built and how far along they was. But my job there was that there was a Marine base sitting right by our photo lab. So the Marines would come out, the helicopter would land, and they would bring the raw film into the photo lab. I was in charge of they called them EH-38 film processing machines. I would process the film, then I would run it back through and make a dupe copy, and then the helicopter would stay right there, and then they would take the originals back in the helicopter wherever they put them, and then we would send them upstairs to the PTs, and then they would draw a little. We would make a copy of the prints, and then they would draw in the prints what they want printed. And it might be the size of a stamp, it might be the size 2-inch square, anything. And then we would print them, and then they would go up and make a mosaic out of it. And then they would shred that, and then that would be on a Monday. Thursday we would do the same thing, and next Monday we would do the same thing, and next Thursday we did the same thing. So, but once we got advantage to myself and a couple other guys, because I was E4 then, and so we went over to the hangar to wait for him to bring the film back, and the U-2 plane, they flew at 55, 50, 60,000 feet, because the radar wasn't over about 45, 50,000 feet then, and then they would drop down to 1,000 feet and run the Cuba. The beach line, and then they was back up in the air. So you'd be standing there going, I don't see no plane, I don't see no plane. Pretty soon it'd go whoosh, and come right down in the hangar doors would close, and then they'd take the film out. I think there was 9 cameras on it, and they was 9x9s, 9x18s, and I don't think this is top secret stuff, by the way. 3 frames a second. So, yeah.
So you enjoyed that job?
So I enjoyed that. Then it got hairy in Cuba a little bit. So me and the first class, we went to the night shift, and we did all the large prints at night. The only bad thing working night was from, midnight to 8, and we worked about 11:30 to 7:30. Is we didn't get to talk to anybody or see anything. So there's another mark that didn't make my Navy career happy was I didn't know when the E5 test was coming up, so I couldn't even take the E5 test, So the guys that came there from boot camp, they made E4 and E5, and I was E4 when I got there. So I didn't have a good taste in my mouth when they wanted me to re-up. So, and there's a carrier sitting out there, and I go, well, I've got a little baby, so I got out and come back to Nebraska.
What did you do when you got out and came back?
Well, I worked for a newspaper that was sold and resold, and I sold advertising and did all the photography work there. Was a fireman for the Waterloo Volunteer Fire Department for 5 years. When I moved to Elkhorn, where we reside now, I was a fireman EMT for 10 years.
Talking about your military service, did you get any blowback of being a vet coming home?
Oh, yes. When I flew back, when I got off the ship to come back to Photoscope, we landed in San Francisco. And when we got to the bus took us to the San Francisco airport. And there was a line where the police had to come and form a line for us in uniform, because it was all in uniform yet, to get out of the bus into the airport. You know, called baby killers, spit at, you know, cussed at, and everything else. So when I got, so then I got back in '70. In '71, my brother-in-law was a Marine, not in Vietnam, but still a Marine, and he lived in Grand Island, so we went to the Legion Hall in Grand Island, ordered a beer, sat down, and the sergeant of arms at the Legion was an old E8 Army guy that, you know, he come up and asked you to see our Legion cards. And I said, no, sir, I don't have a Legion card. I got a VFW card. I got out of Vietnam. And he goes, get out of my club. Kicked us out.
Wow.
So that put another bad taste in my mouth. My dad was like a 50-year Legion member, but I never joined the Legion. And it probably took me about 10 years to get the bad taste out of my mouth. Never told a lot of people that I was in the military. And then I joined the joined the Vietnam Veterans of America. And now I am president of the Vietnam Veterans of America. Got over 210 members. And we do a lot. We're very active. We've got 9 parades every year. We do the MIA, PLW stuff at Memorial Park. I work with Colonel Michael DeVote with the ROTC program. We go to all of the Omaha schools and talk about Vietnam through all the ROTC programs. The outstanding ROTC, we give them a medal and a certificate. So we keep busy, and it keeps me busy.
Okay, looking back over your
Yes.
overall military service, what was the saddest thing that comes to mind that, if you want to tell your future generations?
When I went in, you know, I was a, 18, 19-year-old kid, you know, but you got to have respect, and the respect and the dignity for the country, respect for the flag. And I know that's an old cliche anymore, the flag, but you can burn an American flag, but if you destroy a LBGQ flag, you get thrown in jail. You know, I mean that, and that's less the bad taste, but it's really helped, and I've helped a lot of people by joining the Vietnam vets. You know, over there I grew up. You know, I went as a snot-nosed kid basically, and when I got out of the military, you know, you realize what you did and why you did it and how you did it, and I might have stayed if it had been a different situation, you know, as far as, but I felt like I got hosed a couple times between the ship not getting a promotion and then going to the photo lab and not being told about, you know, I kind of got washed under the table because we worked strictly at night, so. But I'm glad I did it, and I'd do it again. You know, it's one of those things. I'm very patriotic, high respectful of the country and everything. And to me, it's very disappointing when young kids now don't respect the country. And I think part of the biggest mistake the government ever done, the absolute most biggest mistake, was eliminating the draft. All of these woke kids and all of these professional athletes and all of these people, the country would be a lot better off today if all of those kids would have had to go at least 2 years in some kind of military. Because if they didn't do well in the military, they was going to be in the brig. And we had guys in the brig, you know, but there was always somebody tougher than you was.
Okay, let's flip the question.
Okay.
What's the proudest you of your service that you have? What instant was the proudest that you can remember?
You know, I think the proudest I have in the military now is through my Vietnam Veterans Organization. You know, the respect, the camaraderie that we get. When I started in the Chapter 279, the first couple years, and then I was vice president, and our president was letting the chapter go down the hill. He was trying to do everything himself, not communicating with everybody else. And we had 10, 12 members come to our meeting, and the meetings would last 20 minutes or something. And we had a few people quit. And then 5 years ago, we had an election, and I won by 1 vote. And he got mad and has never been back. But in the turn of them first 2 years, we got a parade trailer. We started doing parades, and I'll get 20, 25 at a parade. Since I became president, I picked up almost 60 new members. It's really feels good to me when somebody will email me and say, "I'm sorry I can't make the meeting because I'm sick, or the wife's sick, or we're out of town." That's my proudness when people will come up, or people will come up at a meeting and say, "What can I do? We're going to have a color guard. I'll be at the next parade because I'll do the color guard." And then this last month we had at Valentine's Day happened to fall on our meeting night, so we was going to honor our spouses with a dinner. Well, Valentine's Day has to be Ash Wednesday, so we had to delay it. So last night before last, we had it for the ladies. We invited all the ladies. We had a potluck. We had 40 some people there, almost 50 people there. So it was a 5-minute meeting, and so we all ate and had a couple of drinks, and people was just standing around and talking. It feels, every meeting, it feels good to have 25 or 30 people there. Our meeting's at 6:30, 5:30, everybody's there. The post has food for us. You'll sit down and talk, and after the meeting runs an hour, hour and a half, they'll sit there for another 30 or 40 minutes and talk. We've really formed a good brotherhood. And that was my goal initially when I started, was people would get done with the meeting and everybody would scatter. Now everybody will stay, and we don't talk about war or anything like that. It's good, because the first couple meetings I come up and said, there's 3 rules that I have. We're talking no politics, we're talking no religion, and we're talking no race. I says, every one of us in here are brothers. And I've got 3 black members that are excellent members, but that was my policy from day one, and I've never ever had one conflict. Because if I get a new member that starts to say something, I stop it right. I shut it off. Nope, we don't do that here. If you want to go out and have a beer and you want to talk, Joe got wounded over there, that's fine, but not in my meeting.
Okay, one last question.
Yes.
Looking over your career, what you've been through, and your experiences, what would you like to tell someone 30 years from now when they review this video? What do you want to tell them? A legacy.
Well, and this might be off the beaten path a little bit. The legacy is, in the Vietnam War, we lost a lot of brothers and sisters. And there's a lot of us that come home, have a lot of medical problems now. you know, the bug hit me 50 years after I got back. But that's neither here nor there. That's mine. But show the respect, show the respect to all military, and show the respect to the country. And I think my last good words are, enjoy every day. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I sound off all of my emails and everything anymore. Because all the Vietnam, we're getting in there between 76, 77, and 80, 80, 81, 82. So every time I end up something, and I just had I do 3 or 4 guest speakers every year for different organizations, and I always ended up with the same thing: just enjoy every day. You don't get to have tomorrow over. You don't get today over. Tomorrow's a new day. Be kind and enjoy every day.
Okay. Terry, thank you for your service.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.